Many people enjoy the outdoors by taking walks. Walking not only slows down the rapid pace of life, but it is also a good way of physical exercising. During this time of isolation and social distancing, many have discovered the joy of walking and observing the world around them in order to be in a totally different way. This is because in many ways our minds are not cluttered with the vigorous demands of our normal busy pace of life, which can block out our surroundings. All too often, this means that we pay very little attention to the people who happen to cross our paths. During this time of isolation, we now long for the presence of other people, whether friend or stranger. Now, this may lead us to view the gospel reading from Luke in a much more understanding way. On that third day after the crucifixion, we are told two disciples of Jesus, or followers, not the original 12, were walking on the road to the village of Emmaus. This was some 7 miles from Jerusalem. Walking along, they were busy in conversation when Jesus came near and walked with them. Now, Luke relates, their eyes were kept from recognizing him. Upon Jesus' inquiry about their conversation, he told about what had occurred over the past several days and about their hope for the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. Clearly, they seemed to be highly emotional in their despair and personal crisis. Then they concluded by giving the account of the women who told them about the empty tomb. Jesus then answered, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets had declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" He then continued to explain all of the prophecy and scriptures which confirmed his life as the Messiah. Upon the disciples' invitation, Jesus went with them to spend the evening. Now, while they were around the mealtime table, he took the bread, blessed it, and gave it to them. At this moment, they recognized the stranger, and that at that very moment, he vanished from their sight. They had seen the risen Christ and went on to tell the 11 that very night. Now, this is an amazing story, in that two followers didn't at first recognize the apparent stranger walking with them. After all, even though the women had told them about the angel's message about the resurrection, they were still captive to their emotions. Therefore, it never occurred to them that this could be Jesus, in fact. It wasn't until they sat at the table and Jesus shared the bread, which is an act of love, did they realize that they were in the presence of the risen Christ. This is not only a verification of the sacrament of Holy Communion, but also that the reality of Jesus can be found in our reaching out to others with love. Now, one of my favorite short stories is by Leo Tolstoy, Where Love Is, God Is. The entire story is too long to read to you, but I will read an internet summary of that famous story. It's found in Wikipedia. It goes, where love is, God is. It's a short story about a shoemaker named Martin Aptis. The story begins with a background on Martin's life. He was a fine cobbler, as he did his work well and never promised to do anything that he could not do. He stayed busy with his work in his basement, which had only one window. Through this window, he could see only the feet of people. He was still able to recognize most people by their shoes, as he had worked with most of the shoes at least once. He had a wife, but she had died, and all their children had died in infancy, except a 3-year-old son. After he thought about sending him off to live with his sister, he decided to care for the child himself. Martin, however, was not destined to have a child, as his son died. That was a few years later with a fever. In grief, he denied God, wondering how he could allow such a thing to happen to him. One day, a missionary visited Martin, and Martin told him of his hardships. This missionary told Martin that he should live his life for God and not deny him, because God's will is the ultimate deciding factor. And as humans, we cannot question that. The missionary's words sank deep into Martin. After this encounter, Martin went out and bought a large print testament. He began to read the Bible at first only on holidays, but as he read more and more, it became daily. His life became full with peace and joy. After his day of work, he would sit down with a lamp and read. Now, one night, Martin read a passage about a Pharisee who had invited Jesus into his house, and in the house a woman anointed and washed Jesus' feet with her tears. Martin thought of himself as the Pharisee in that story, as he was only living for himself. As Martin slept, he thought he heard the voice of God telling him that he would visit him the next day. That next morning, Martin skeptically watched out his window for God. While he was searching for God, he saw Stephanus shoveling away snow. Martin invited him in for a warm drink, and they talked for a while. Martin told Stephanus about Jesus and the Pharisee, and Stephanus was moved to tears. Stephanus later left and thanked Martin for the food, both for the soul and body. Now, Martin later saw a young woman outside with a baby not properly dressed for the cold. He invited her in for some food and gave her warmer clothes and money. Martin also told her about Jesus, and she thanked him and left. Then he saw a young boy stealing from an older lady. He went outside and settled their argument as he extended love and compassion towards both of them. Now that night, while Martin wondered why God had not visited him, the three figures appeared in his home who had shown hospitality that day. They said that he had helped them. He was helping God. When he helped them, he was helping God. Martin then realized that God had indeed visited him, and he accepted him well. Now, during this time, when our contact with others is extremely limited, there still are opportunities to extend our love to those who are in need. It may be a telephone call, maybe an email or other internet means, or even a card or letter. We can always give to those who are in need of food. Whenever we get the opportunity, a thank you to those who are placing themselves in danger in order to save the life and well-being of others can mean so much. This is a window into experiencing the act of God's loving presence. It is during times of difficulty, sacrifice, and crisis that we can experience God's presence among us through the sharing of love. God has not abandoned us. He is there for us. Through every act of love we are privileged to witness or perform, as did Martin the shoemaker. It is then we can relate to the psalmist's words, I will sing of your steadfast love, O Lord, forever. With my mouth, I will proclaim your faithfulness to all generations. Amen.